Hi, Leo. I hope you can hear me. You have a great show called This Week in Google.
Yeah, we do a show called This Week in Google.
I recommend everyone listens to it.
Thank you.
The question,
He's recommending it.
Because I've been a long-time fan. The question I had is, you've been watching all these Google changes and the change in management. I wonder if you could share some insights on what you see that's going on there and where they're headed.
He wants to know what, because we do cover Google, and that's one of the shows I love doing the most, with Gina Trapani and Lifehacker and Smarterware, and Jeff Jarvis, who's a very astute observer on this subject, and wrote the book, What Would Google Do? I know there are a lot of Googlers here. I think Google is in a very difficult situation right now, and I think they're frankly fumbling the ball. I think I'm very interested in what you all think of this, but I think that search engines are becoming less and less relevant. I think, for instance, I'll give you an example of how Google is in trouble, and maybe, I suspect they know it, they're very, very smart, but maybe doesn't, is Apple's Siri. We've talked about this a little bit. We know now that Steve Jobs declared thermonuclear war on Google. He was so pissed off that Google, he says, stole the iPhone and made Android, that he said, I'm going to spend every penny of Apple's $40 billion, which is, by the way, now $80 billion, and to my last dying breath, to kill Google. And my friend Mike Elgin just wrote a very interesting article, which I recommend, calls it back, in which he says, I think I know what this thermonuclear war is to not only to pull all of Google's apps from the iPhone, and that's clearly happening. Apple has bought several mapping technologies. Google Maps will be gone soon. But also to replace Google search with Siri. And I think this is very interesting. You know, I don't know how many of you have iPhone 4Ss. At first I thought Siri was to me it was another FaceTime. It was something that demoed cool, very cool, but wasn't particularly something you use a lot, and I find I use it a lot. And what Siri is, Siri will be, I am convinced Apple will put this on every platform, including its desktops, and encouraging people, instead of going to google.com, which we don't do anymore anyway, but instead of using the Google search engine, querying Siri. And Siri will in effect, you know, we talk sometimes about disintermediation, that the internet disintermediates. It eliminates, you know, travel agents because we can go directly to airlines. It will do the opposite. It will intermediate search. It will interpose itself between you and Google and give Apple the ability to redirect search traffic, not just to Wolfram Alpha, but to many other places. And in fact, I think this is what consumers want. I think we're seeing with the rise of social search that simple search results are no longer, consumers will no longer want that. And I think Google has a very big challenge. I love Google Plus, I use it a lot, and I think the main reason I use it is because it's a geek audience. It's not a mainstream audience, and I think even with the addition of brands, the brand pages are very poorly designed at this point. They, you know, for instance, if you set up a brand page, it doesn't warn you about this. I set up my brand page for Twitter. I'm the only one who can post to it. And in order to get anybody else to post to my brand page right now, I have to give my Google Gmail credentials to my employees. That's not going to work. So I think Google understands the train that's coming at them. It's so interesting. I've been doing this so long. I've watched companies rise and fall. I think, you know, humans aren't good at time scale. We kind of feel like this is the way it is and will always be. But I've seen, you know, Atari rise and fall. I've seen Microsoft rise and believe it or not, it's starting to fall. IBM rise and fall. And I think Google could very well be on the downward slope. I don't think they're going to control and dominate the search. We always wondered, how could you beat Google? How could you duplicate that massive index? The barrier to entry to be the next Google is impossible. That's true, but we weren't thinking properly because it wasn't create the next Google. It's what's the next thing, and I don't think that it's Google-style search, to be honest. In fact, that's why they say SMO is the new SEO, right? Isn't that? Or I don't know what's the new SMO now. SME is the new SMO. I don't know. This moves too fast, and I think Google is actually about to fall. Larry Page was smart to take the reins back from Eric Schmidt. I think Eric was a good manager. I think Larry's much more of a visionary. but I think he's got a challenge. I don't think that they have the institutional ability to deal with the challenge. Facebook is so, there's an example of a company that is so mono-focused and knows what it's up to. And Google doesn't seem to really be as focused or know exactly what it's up to. So my analysis is Google's in deep trouble. And if I were in your business, I would really be looking at alternatives to search engine marketing and search engine optimization. I don't think in the long run. For instance, Google changed Google Reader dramatically and upset a lot of, whoever was still using Google Reader view. But the truth is, while I still use Google Reader, I think most of us no longer use news readers to get our news. We look at Twitter, we look at Facebook, we see what surfaces. There's a nervous system now that is made up of these social networks that signal, very effectively signal what's going on. We almost absorb now, those of us who are wired into these services, almost passively absorb what's hot just by kind of being. We don't have to actively search it out anymore. I think there's a big change going on. Well, there always is. And I think Google is not necessarily on the right side of it.